Florida State might be the most confusing team in college football right now. One week, they shocked the entire country by beating Alabama, a game almost nobody thought they'd win. Florida State was riding the high of the win for the next few weeks. They were one of the most confident teams in the country, but then came Virginia, and that's where everything fell apart. So how did Florida State go from giant killer to a team that couldn't stop Virginia's run game? When the season kicked off, FSU made the loudest statement possible. They didn't just beat Alabama, they out-physicaled them. Sure, the first defensive drive was shaky. Bama went right down the field. But after that, Florida State's defense shut the door. Alabama scored just 10 more points the rest of the way, and their run game completely died. Coming out of that game, it looked like Florida State was a playoff contender. But then came Virginia. Odds makers had FSU as just a 6.5 point favorite, which already raised eyebrows. Still, most people thought they'd roll. Instead, Virginia dominated on the ground. It didn't matter what FSU did. They couldn't stop it. Virginia didn't just cover, they beat Florida State outright. The same team that handled Alabama got bullied by Virginia. So what happened? How does a team swing this violently from one week to another? There's no single answer, but there are a few explanations we need to look at. The first thing we have to look at is Alabama. On paper, that week 1 win looked like a program-defining moment for Florida State. But let's dig in. First, the quarterback. Ty Simpson was making his first career start on the road in a huge spotlight. He didn't play terribly, but he wasn't anywhere near the player he is now. Fast forward 4 weeks, and Simpson looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He just carved up Georgia and Athens. That wasn't the version Florida State faced. Next, the run game. Alabama's rushing attack has been a weakness ever since Kalen DeBoer took over. Last year, they leaned on Jalen Milroe's legs to bail them out. But this year, they don't have that option, and it shows. Alabama's rushing offense currently ranks 107th in the country. Think about that. The Alabama Crimson Tide, known for dominant running backs, are near the bottom of the nation. And here's the red flag for Florida State. That weakness played right into their hands. Alabama's run game wasn't going to test FSU's front. Their quarterback wasn't ready to put the team on his back. Florida State may have caught Alabama at the perfect time and the perfect matchup. That doesn't mean the win wasn't legit. FSU's offense proved it could move the ball against a tough defense. But looking back, it might explain how they went from looking like a contender to looking lost just a few weeks later. Now let's fast forward to the Virginia game, where everything came crashing down. Before we even talk about Virginia, let's start with Florida State. Think about the mindset. You're a team that just beat Alabama. You've been dominating everyone else, and the same analysts who doubted you all offseason are suddenly calling you a contender. That's a complete shift in mentality from where you were before the Alabama game, when nobody expected much. And with college athletes, it's easy to start drinking the Kool-Aid, to believe the hype and start taking your opponents a little less seriously. Then you add another factor. This was Florida State's first road game of the season. In Tallahassee, you've got the home crowd feeding you energy. On the road, it's different. Mistakes get magnified. Momentum is harder to grab, and you can't just rely on the stadium to lift you when things get tight. Now let's get into the matchup itself. Florida State has a real weakness against the run. They didn't realize it after Alabama because Alabama's rushing attack is one of the worst in the country. But Virginia is the complete opposite. They came into the game ranked 12th in rushing offense with a physical offensive line and a backfield built to pound the ball over and over. That's exactly the kind of team that exposes a defense like Florida State's. And it played out perfectly for Virginia. At one point, their quarterback even injured his hand. He was clearly holding his thumb in pain between plays. Everyone in the stadium knew they weren't throwing the ball on that drive, and it didn't matter. Virginia kept running. Florida State still couldn't stop it, and that drive ended in a touchdown. That's not just a physical problem, that's a psychological gut punch for a defense. Even with all of that, Florida State still had chances. They actually outgained Virginia in total yards, but the difference came down to mistakes. Florida State turned the ball over deep in Virginia territory, blowing prime scoring chances. Virginia had turnovers too, but they came at much less costly moments. That's the razor-thin margin that separates pulling off a comeback from walking out with an upset loss. So when you put it all together, the mental letdown after the Alabama win, the first road game jitters, the hidden weakness in the run defense finally being exposed, and turnovers in the worst possible spots, you've got the recipe for one of the most shocking results of the season. So where does Florida State go from here? The season is far from over, but this week's game against Miami could literally decide the rest of their year. After Miami, the schedule looks favorable, or dangerous depending on how you see it. The only real tests left on paper were Florida and Clemson, but both have started the season terribly. If you're Florida State, that's good news. The path to a clean record seems wide open, but here's the catch. With so few quality opponents left, there's almost no room for error. One loss, and their playoff hopes could evaporate, because there aren't other big wins left to bolster their resume. Winning out against a soft conference schedule and beating Alabama in Week 1 may not be enough. But if Florida State can take down Miami, everything changes. Suddenly, they're in the driver's seat with a clear path to the playoff that could be the easiest in the country. So the big question, can Florida State beat Miami? Because that one game could define whether this team is a true contender or just another wild card that fell short. Quick timeout. If you're enjoying this breakdown and want more deep dives like this every week, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow, and it guarantees you won't miss the next one. Back to the video. Miami ranks middle of the pack in rushing yards per game at just 51, but those numbers can be very deceiving. Their running game is extremely physical, and the low average is mostly because they've faced tough defenses, while most other teams have been playing cupcakes. That style of attack could give Florida State real trouble, especially since they can't just key on the run. Miami also has an effective passing game that can stretch the field. Florida State, however, is back at home, and that matters. After last week's tough loss, you can expect more focus, more intensity, and more tenacity. The combination of playing a hyped-up opponent and having the sting of defeat fresh in their minds should make them look like a completely different team. Even with that, Miami will likely put up 30 or more points. That means Florida State is going to have to score a lot to keep up. Fortunately, that's exactly what they've done all season. They currently lead the nation, averaging 53 points per game. Now that doesn't automatically make them the best offense in the country, and it doesn't guarantee they'll hit that mark against Miami, but it does show that this offense is explosive, capable of scoring quickly, and can compete in any shootout. Florida State knows this game is going to be a test. They know they're going to have to put up points if they want to win. With an offense like theirs, though, almost any game is winnable if they execute and stay focused. Will Florida State right the ship and recapture the swagger they showed against Alabama? Or was the humbling loss to Virginia a warning of what could be coming against Miami? Those questions won't be answered until Saturday, but one thing is certain. Florida State knows the magnitude of this game. The energy, the focus, the intensity, everything will be on display. A win could reignite their season, put them back on the path to the playoffs, and restore the confidence of a team that started the year looking dominant. A loss, however, could be a devastating setback, leaving them with little margin for error and forcing them to claw their way back into contention. The outcome of this matchup will likely decide not just a single game, but the direction of the rest of Florida State's season.